CBS retcons NCIS's 18-year history by breaking one trend for nearly 2 decades. NCIS has thrived on a quiet promise to its audience: consistency. Not predictability, exactly, because the show has never shied away from shocking twists, emotional farewells, or high stakes drama, but a kind of structural reliability. Viewers knew what they were getting. A case would unfold, clues would scatter like breadcrumbs, and by the end, justice would land with satisfying precision. It was a rhythm, almost ritualistic, and it became part of the show's identity. So when CBS chose to break one of NCIS's longest standing storytelling trends, it didn't just tweak the formula, it disrupted the very heartbeat of the series. For 18 years, NCIS operated on a largely episodic model. Sure, there were character arcs and occasional multi episode threads, but the core of the show remained rooted in standalone cases. Each episode was its own contained story, allowing viewers to jump in at almost any point without feeling lost. This accessibility was a cornerstone of its success. It's what made NCIS a comfort show, a procedural you could revisit endlessly, confident that each hour would deliver a beginning, middle, and end. But in its latest narrative shift, that safety net has been pulled away. Instead of resolving its central mystery within a single episode or even a neat two-parter, the show now leans heavily into serialized storytelling. A case introduced early in the season lingers, mutates, and evolves across multiple episodes, refusing to be tied up with a simple bow. Clues introduced weeks earlier resurface with new meaning. Characters carry the emotional weight of unresolved threads. The story breathes in a way NCIS has rarely allowed before. And in doing so, CBS has effectively rewritten the rules that NCIS has followed since its inception. At first glance, this might seem like a natural evolution. Television as a whole has trended towards serialization, especially in the streaming era where binge watching encourages long form narratives. Audiences have grown accustomed to intricate plots that demand attention and reward patience. In that context, NCIS's shift feels almost inevitable, a necessary adaptation to remain relevant in a rapidly changing landscape. But the impact of this change runs deeper than simple modernization. By abandoning its episodic roots, NCIS is also redefining how it engages with its characters. In the past, personal development often took a back seat to the case of the week. Emotional moments were impactful, but they were frequently compartmentalized, resolved quickly so the story could reset for the next episode. Now, those emotions linger. A decision made in one episode ripples outward, affecting relationships and choices long after the credits roll. This creates a richer, more immersive experience, but it also demands more from the audience. Gone are the days when you could casually tune in midway through a season and immediately feel at home. The new NCIS expects commitment. It asks viewers to remember details, to track evolving dynamics, to invest in a narrative that doesn't offer instant gratification. For longtime fans, this can be both thrilling and disorienting. The show they've relied on for nearly 2 decades suddenly feels different, more ambitious, but also less familiar. There's a certain irony in its transformation. NCIS built its legacy on being dependable, on delivering a consistent product in an industry that often chases trends. It was the show that didn't need reinvention because it understood its audience so well. And yet, by choosing to break its own trend, it has embraced the very kind of storytelling evolution it once seemed immune to. The question, then, is whether this change strengthens the series or undermines what made it special in the first place. On one hand, the serialized approach allows for deeper storytelling. Mysteries can unfold with greater complexity, characters can evolve more naturally, and the stakes can feel genuinely higher. There's a sense that anything can happen because the narrative isn't confined to a single episode's runtime. This unpredictability injects fresh energy into a show that, after so many years, risks feeling repetitive. On the other hand, there's a cost to this ambition. The episodic format wasn't just a structural choice, it was part of NCIS's identity. It made the show approachable, comforting, and endlessly rewatchable. By moving away from that format, NCIS risks alienating viewers who valued its simplicity. Not every fan wants to commit to a sprawling narrative. Sometimes, the appeal lies in a self contained story that can be enjoyed without homework. This tension between innovation and tradition sits at the heart of CBS's decision. It's not just about changing how stories are told, it's about redefining what NCIS is. Is it still the procedural powerhouse that dominated network television for years? Or is it evolving into something closer to a prestige drama where long form storytelling takes precedence over accessibility? The answer, at least for now, seems to be both. The show hasn't completely abandoned its roots. There are still elements of the classic NCIS formula woven into each episode: investigations, interrogations, moments of levity that balance the darker themes. But these elements now exist within a larger framework, one that prioritizes continuity over closure. This hybrid approach might be the key to the show's future. By blending episodic and serialized storytelling, NCIS has the opportunity to appeal to a broader audience. Longtime fans can still find the familiar beats they love, while new viewers, accustomed to more complex narratives, can appreciate the deeper layers. It's a delicate balance, and not every episode will strike it perfectly, but the potential is undeniable. What makes this shift particularly significant is its timing. After 18 years, NCIS has nothing left to prove. Its place in television history is secure. And yet, instead of coasting on its success, the show has chosen to take a risk, to challenge itself and its audience. That willingness to evolve is, in its own way, a testament to the series' enduring strength. Because the greatest threat to a long running show isn't failure, it's stagnation. By breaking one of its oldest trends, NCIS has ensured that it won't simply fade into the background of its own legacy. It has sparked conversation, invited debate, and reminded viewers that even the most established series can still surprise them. Whether this bold move ultimately pays off remains to be seen. But one thing is certain: NCIS is no longer playing it safe. And after 18 years of doing things one way, that alone is enough to make this new chapter feel like uncharted territory. If the first phase of this transformation felt like a tremor beneath NCIS's foundation, then what follows is the aftershock. The realization that this isn't a temporary experiment, but a deliberate reimagining of how the show wants to tell its stories moving forward. Because once a series breaks a rule it has followed for nearly 2 decades, it can't simply pretend nothing changed. What's most fascinating about this shift is how it subtly alters the tone of NCIS. The series has always balanced humor and gravity, often within the same scene. A tense interrogation might be punctuated by a quick quip, a dark revelation softened by a familiar bit of team banter. That tonal elasticity has been one of the show's greatest strengths, allowing it to tackle serious subject matter without becoming emotionally overwhelming. But serialization changes that balance. When a storyline stretches across multiple episodes, the emotional weight accumulates. There's less room for a full reset, less opportunity to return to a neutral baseline. A traumatic event doesn't fade neatly into the background, it lingers, influencing how characters speak, react, and even investigate. The humor is still there, but it feels more restrained, more purposeful, as if the show itself understands that the stakes are no longer confined to a single hour. This evolution also brings a sharper focus to consequences. In the past, NCIS could occasionally sidestep the long term fallout of its most dramatic moments. A betrayal might sting for an episode or two before the narrative moved on. A risky decision could pay off without fully exploring what might have gone wrong. Now, those shortcuts are harder to justify. When a story unfolds over time, every choice matters more. Every misstep has the potential to echo across episodes, reshaping relationships and redefining trust within the team. And that's where the real retcon begins to take shape, not in rewriting past events, but in reframing how those events would have mattered under this new storytelling philosophy. It invites viewers to look back at 18 years of NCIS and imagine how different certain arcs might have felt if they had been given this kind of narrative space. How would some of the show's most iconic departures have resonated if their aftermath had unfolded over several episodes instead of being compressed into one? How might long-standing relationships have evolved if the show had allowed conflicts to breathe instead of resolving them quickly? These questions don't diminish the past, they highlight how much storytelling potential was left unexplored under the old format. At the same time, this shift places a heavier burden on the writers. Episodic storytelling offers a kind of safety net. If one episode doesn't land perfectly, the next can start fresh. Serialization removes that cushion. A weak link in the chain can affect multiple episodes, disrupting the flow of an entire arc. Continuity errors become more noticeable. Pacing becomes more critical. The margin for error shrinks. And yet, when it works, the payoff is exponentially greater. A well executed serialized arc can deliver a level of emotional and narrative satisfaction that standalone episodes rarely achieve. The slow build of tension, the gradual unveiling of secrets, the culmination of threads that have been carefully woven together, it creates a sense of cohesion that elevates the entire season. For NCIS, a show that has spent years mastering the art of the procedural, this represents both a challenge and an opportunity. There's also an interesting shift in how viewers engage with the series outside of the episodes themselves. In the past, discussions around NCIS often centered on individual cases, the twists, the suspects, the clever reveals. Now, the conversation expands. Fans speculate about ongoing mysteries, analyze character motivations, and piece together clues that might not pay off until weeks later. The viewing experience becomes more interactive, more participatory. In a way, NCIS is no longer just something you watch, it's something you follow. This change aligns the show more closely with modern viewing habits, where audiences are accustomed to dissecting episodes, sharing theories, and engaging with long form narratives in real time. It transforms NCIS from a reliable procedural into a conversation starter, a series that invites deeper investment. But that transformation also raises an important question about identity. Can NCIS evolve this dramatically without losing the essence of what made it successful in the first place? The answer likely depends on how well it maintains its core characters. Because no matter how much the structure changes, NCIS has always been, at its heart, a character driven show. The cases matter, the mysteries intrigue, but it's the team, their dynamics, their loyalty, their humor, that keeps viewers coming back. As long as that foundation remains intact, the series has room to experiment with how it tells its stories. In fact, the new format might even strengthen that foundation. By allowing characters more time to process events and develop relationships, NCIS can deepen the very elements that have defined it for so long. Conversations that once felt rushed can unfold naturally. Conflicts can simmer instead of resolving instantly. Growth can feel earned rather than implied. It's a different kind of storytelling, but one that still honors the spirit of the show. Ultimately, CBS's decision to break this 18-year trend isn't just about keeping NCIS relevant, it's about ensuring it remains alive. Not just continuing, but evolving. Not just repeating, but redefining. And while that evolution may feel unfamiliar at times, it also carries a certain excitement. Because for the first time in a long time, NCIS feels unpredictable again. Not in the sense of shocking twists or dramatic exits, those have always been part of its DNA, but in how it chooses to tell its story. The structure itself has become a source of intrigue, a variable that keeps viewers guessing. After 18 years, that's no small feat. It's a reminder that even the most established shows can still find new ways to surprise us, not by abandoning their past, but by daring to build on it in unexpected ways. And perhaps the most intriguing consequence of this shift isn't what it changes on screen, but what it reveals about the future of NCIS as a franchise. Because when a show as established as NCIS breaks one of its most consistent storytelling traditions, it sends a signal. Not just to its audience, but to the broader television landscape it has helped shape for nearly 2 decades. It suggests that longevity no longer depends on staying the same. That survival, especially in an era dominated by streaming giants and evolving viewer expectations, requires a willingness to adapt, even at the risk of unsettling the very fans who made the show a success. In many ways, this moment feels like a quiet turning point. NCIS is no longer just preserving its legacy, it's actively negotiating with it. There's a delicate tension in that process. Lean too far into reinvention, and the show risks losing its identity. Hold too tightly to tradition, and it risks becoming stagnant. The current shift towards serialization exists right in that in between space, where every creative decision feels like a test of balance. And balance, as NCIS is discovering, is harder to maintain than consistency ever was. One of the most noticeable changes lies in how suspense is constructed. Previously, tension in NCIS was immediate and self contained. The mystery began and ended within a clearly defined window, creating a sense of urgency that drove each episode forward. Now, suspense stretches across time. It lingers in unanswered questions, in subtle hints that may not pay off until much later. This kind of storytelling demands patience, not just from viewers, but from the show itself. It requires confidence that the audience will stay invested, that they will trust the narrative enough to follow it through its slower, more intricate developments. And that trust is not guaranteed. It must be earned, episode by episode, thread by thread. Yet there's something undeniably compelling about this new approach. It allows NCIS to explore ambiguity in ways it rarely has before. Not every clue leads to an immediate answer. Not every character's motive is fully understood right away. There's room for uncertainty, for doubt, for the kind of narrative gray areas that make stories feel more realistic and, ultimately, more human. This added complexity also reshapes the role of the viewer. No longer a passive observer, the audience becomes an active participant in the storytelling process. Each episode offers pieces of a larger puzzle, inviting viewers to connect the dots, to question assumptions, to anticipate what might come next. It's a subtle but significant shift, one that transforms the act of watching into something more engaging, more intellectually satisfying. But with that engagement comes a different kind of risk. If the payoff doesn't match the buildup, the disappointment is magnified. A storyline that spans multiple episodes carries higher expectations. Its resolution must feel earned, its twists justified, its emotional beats authentic. Anything less can undermine not just a single episode, but the entire arc. For a show like NCIS, which has built its reputation on reliability, this is unfamiliar territory. And yet, it's precisely this willingness to step into the unknown that makes the current era so fascinating. Because beneath all the structural changes, all the shifts in pacing and tone, there's a deeper question at play. What does it mean for a show to grow after 18 years? Growth, by its nature, involves change. It requires letting go of certain habits to make room for new possibilities. For NCIS, breaking its episodic trend is more than a stylistic choice. It's an acknowledgement that the show cannot rely solely on what worked in the past. It must evolve or risk becoming irrelevant. And evolution, as this season demonstrates, is rarely comfortable. There are moments when the new format feels slightly at odds with the show's traditional strengths. Scenes linger longer than expected. Resolutions are delayed. Familiar rhythms are disrupted. For some viewers, this may feel like a loss, a departure from the comforting predictability that once defined NCIS. But for others, it's a welcome change. It injects a sense of discovery into a series that could easily have settled into routine. It challenges expectations, encouraging viewers to see the show in a new light. It proves that even after nearly 2 decades, NCIS is still capable of surprising its audience, not just with what happens, but with how it happens. And that distinction matters. Because in the end, storytelling isn't just about events, it's about experience. It's about the journey as much as the destination. By embracing serialization, NCIS is reshaping that journey, turning it into something more layered, more unpredictable, more reflective of the complexities of modern television. Of course, whether this new direction becomes a permanent fixture or a temporary experiment remains to be seen. Television history is filled with shows that have attempted similar transitions, with varying degrees of success. Some have found new life in serialized storytelling, while others have struggled to reconcile it with their established identity. NCIS now finds itself at that same crossroads, navigating a path that offers both opportunity and uncertainty. But perhaps that's what makes this moment so significant. For the first time in a long time, NCIS doesn't feel like a show that has everything figured out. It feels like a show in motion, adapting, experimenting, taking risks. And in an industry where longevity often leads to complacency, that sense of movement is a powerful thing. It reminds us that even the most familiar stories can still change. That even after 18 years, a single broken trend can open the door to entirely new possibilities. And that sometimes the boldest way to honor a legacy is to challenge it. And yet, for all its ambition, this new chapter of NCIS circles back to a deceptively simple truth: change only matters if it means something. Breaking an 18-year trend isn't inherently powerful. It becomes powerful when that break reveals something deeper about the characters, about the world they inhabit, and about the emotional core that has always anchored the series. Without that substance, serialization would just be a stylistic flourish, a surface level evolution that risks feeling hollow. So far, what makes this shift resonate is how it reframes time within the show. In the classic NCIS structure, time was compressed. Events unfolded quickly, conflicts were introduced and resolved within a tight window, and the narrative moved forward with a steady, almost clockwork precision. It mirrored the procedural nature of the cases themselves: efficient, focused, and goal oriented. Now, time stretches. Moments are allowed to linger. Silences carry weight. A glance between characters can hold as much meaning as a line of dialogue. The pacing isn't just slower, it's more deliberate. It invites the audience to sit with the story rather than race through it. This shift fundamentally changes how tension operates. Instead of building toward a single climactic reveal at the end of an episode, tension ebbs and flows across a larger arc. There are smaller peaks and valleys, moments of quiet unease followed by bursts of intensity. It's less about a single payoff and more about a sustained emotional experience. And that experience, at its best, feels richer. But it also requires restraint, something NCIS hasn't always needed to prioritize in the same way before. Episodic storytelling thrives on clarity. Each episode must establish its stakes quickly, develop its narrative efficiently, and deliver a resolution that feels complete. There's little room for ambiguity or excess. Serialization, on the other hand, allows for and sometimes even demands both. The danger lies in overindulgence. A storyline that stretches too thin can lose its impact. A mystery that withholds too much can frustrate rather than intrigue. The challenge for NCIS is finding that precise balance where the narrative feels expansive but never unfocused, complex but never convoluted. And that's where the show's experience becomes its greatest asset. After 18 years, NCIS understands storytelling at a fundamental level. It knows how to build tension, how to craft compelling characters, how to deliver emotional payoffs. The question isn't whether it can tell a good story, it's whether it can adapt those instincts to a different format. So far, the answer appears to be cautiously optimistic. There are growing pains, certainly. Moments where the pacing feels uneven, or where the weight of serialization clashes with the show's procedural roots. But there are also flashes of brilliance, scenes where the extended narrative allows for a depth and nuance that wouldn't have been possible before. Those moments hint at what NCIS could become if it fully embraces this evolution. Not a departure from its identity, but an expansion of it. Because at its core, NCIS has always been about more than solving cases. It's about loyalty, about trust, about the bonds that form between people working in high pressure, high stakes environments. The procedural format provided a framework for exploring those themes, but it also imposed limits. Serialization removes some of those limits. It gives the show space to explore the gray areas of its characters' lives, the doubts, the regrets, the unresolved tensions that don't fit neatly into a single episode. It allows relationships to evolve in more organic ways, to reflect the messiness of real human connections. In doing so, it brings NCIS closer to something it has always hinted at but rarely fully embraced: emotional continuity. And that might be the most significant retcon of all. Not a change to the show's history, but a change to how that history feels. Moments that once seemed isolated now feel like part of a larger tapestry. Character decisions carry more weight because they're no longer confined to a single narrative loop. The past doesn't reset, it accumulates. It matters. For longtime viewers, this can be a profoundly rewarding shift. It validates years of investment, giving new meaning to relationships and events that might have once felt fleeting. It transforms NCIS from a series of episodes into an ongoing story, one that acknowledges its own history in a more continuous, interconnected way. At the same time, it challenges the show to remain accessible. Because one of NCIS's greatest strengths has always been its ability to welcome new viewers. The episodic format made it easy to jump in at any point to enjoy the show without needing extensive context. Serialization complicates that accessibility, creating a barrier to entry that didn't exist before. How the show navigates that tension will likely determine the long term success of this shift. Can it maintain the depth and continuity of serialized storytelling while still offering enough clarity for casual viewers? Can it honor its past while embracing its future? Can it evolve without losing the qualities that made it a cultural mainstay? These are not easy questions. But they are, in many ways, the questions every long running series must eventually face. And what makes NCIS's current moment so compelling is that it's choosing to face them head on. It's choosing to take a risk. After 18 years of refining a formula that worked, it's stepping outside of that comfort zone, testing new boundaries, and redefining its own identity in the process. That kind of creative courage is rare, especially for a show with such an established legacy. Whether this gamble ultimately succeeds is still an open question. But success, in this context, might not be measured solely by ratings or critical reception. It might be measured by something less tangible but equally important: the ability to keep the story alive, to keep it evolving, to keep it meaningful. Because in the end, that's what this broken trend represents. Not just a change in structure, but a statement of intent. NCIS isn't content to simply continue. It wants to grow. And after nearly 2 decades on the air, that desire to challenge itself, to adapt, to become something more, is perhaps the most compelling twist the series has ever delivered.